Good evening, everybody, and welcome to another Western But WED talk. My name is Tabitha Sheehan. I am the head of English at Western But Senior School, and I am talking to you tonight about reading, probably quite typically so given my position, but also reading in a different manner, reading to survive, as the title of the talk is. And that is primarily because I get asked a lot about it in my job, but also by friends and family. And it's something that I feel really passionate about. It's really important to children, but also to adults and their kind of general health. So the Reading to Survive title comes from how reading benefits people in a various kind of myriad of ways. So I really want to talk to you about that tonight. I'm going to share my screen with you to kind of talk you through some of the kind of main focuses of this talk tonight with you. And I really hope you find it informative and engaging. And please do feel free to email me if you have any further questions at the end of it. So, Reading to Survive. There are 4 topics that I've particularly focused on for this, partly because they're outside of what would probably be a considerably literary realm of talking about reading. And so it's a little bit more interesting for me and hopefully also for you to see why reading is so important in, like I said earlier, various kind of manner of ways. I've come up with 4 particular focuses for this, which I hope are things that you already probably are aware of, but stuff we can teach you a little bit more about tonight. And you will notice probably quite quickly that I have just used really straightforward 4 Bs here. My students will know how much I love synonyms, and that really links to my first point about burgeoning your vocabulary. Then we'll look at brain power and how reading can boost that and your brain health. We'll also look at your mental health and kind of mental health issues and how reading can be a really useful tool for dealing with and supporting those. And finally, probably the one I'm most passionate about, if I'm honest, is the compassion and imagination that reading builds. It's one of the main reasons I got into teaching. It's also one of the biggest joys you see in the classroom when children start reading texts that engage them and help them engage better with each other in the world. But I'm going to start with the vocabulary because I think this is the one that most parents tend to think more about when they're asking us at parents' evenings how to get them reading more or what do we think of their reading skills. So firstly, vocabulary obviously is the access of your speech and your written ability. And I think people often focus on it so heavily because it's something that we use all the time. It's our primary method of communication for most of us. And therefore, the bigger your vocabulary, the more you often feel confident in speaking, and often the more intelligent you are deemed. So I think vocab is a key and vital point of reading. And primarily, you build your vocabulary through reading because you'll just pick up words and you learn them and you learn to look up a word you don't know and you suddenly learn to think about synonyms and semantics and connotations. So vocab is the most basic skill, and it's also through reading that children tend to actually access language and get their vocabulary started. And lots of key studies have shown us that children who read more regularly tend to have developed and larger vocabularies than those who don't, and they also as a result tend to have higher IQs. So reading at a young age to your children and with your children and as a child is absolutely vital for kind of later life vocabulary and some intelligence skills. What's really key and hopefully really encouraging about this is that it doesn't actually end with children. You don't suddenly get to a point where you can stop learning words or stop learning at all. So frequent reading and developing your reading at any age will actually boost your vocabulary, which then develops your coherency, your confidence in what you have to say and the words that you can use and what's kind of available to you to share your meanings and your intentions. And that in itself, again, that vocabulary boost, that understanding of semantics will develop your further IQ and your further confidence in writing and speaking, the latter of which are both integral skills to relationship, work, travel, really. So any area of life, vocab will help you boost and help you develop, really. One thing that I came across in researching this further that interested me personally was actually the importance of these things like soft skills that employers are looking for. And there's a study by Cengage that shows 69% of employers are actually looking really particularly for people with communication skills now. I think in our current climate, having to do everything over videos like this or over emails is probably more relevant than before, because you have to know how to communicate so effectively in context, and reading books exposes you to new words, it exposes you to different contexts for language, and that's a vital skill in the workplace now and when we return to normal, as it were. One thing to note that I think is really crucial here is because we get a lot of this as well from parents, and a lot of my friends and family ask me the same question, is how important is it to read from a book as opposed to a device like a laptop or even Kindles and things like that. And actually there is a significant difference in reading print than there is to reading off screen. People who read from print books do tend to do better on comprehension tests than you would if you read everything digitally. So that's not to say don't read off your iPad or don't read off your Kindles, but it is to say that reading books does have more of an impact on your vocabulary and your comprehension skills. And I think that's a lot of the research shows, because you read slower when you read off the page. People tend to take a bit more time and they have to work a little bit harder, whereas we're so used to skim reading everything digitally that we tend to get a little bit lazier. So a big kind of point really here is, as much as possible, read off the page, but if you're reading a tool, that is still obviously fabulous. So either way. The next one that I really want to focus on is brain power, because again, it links really nicely with vocab. People tend to think that those who are big readers or have excellent vocabularies are more intelligent, and that's not necessarily always the case, but I think it certainly helps you think in different manners, and it certainly does boost your brain, as I'm going to go into here. And one of the biggest studies in reading and how it affects your brain chemistry is actually to do with memory loss, particularly with dementia and Alzheimer's and other kind of brain diseases or illnesses you pick up as you get older. So a really key part of that has got to be how reading can both reduce, or lack of reading can increase, your chances of getting brain illnesses. A really interesting study from the Academy of Neurology in America actually showed that those who read often saw a 32% reduction of risks of dementia and Alzheimer's, whereas those who read infrequently, which is really, really sad, found that their mental decline actually was 48% faster than those with average reading activity. So if you are a good reader already, or a frequent reader already, you are boosting your brain and protecting your brain from memory loss diseases. And if you're not a frequent reader, you have significantly larger chance of picking up some of these illnesses. So it's really important to think about that longer term impact that not reading has, not just on your vocabulary and your intelligence and comprehension, but also again on that brain health and that brain chemistry. What's really important about reading as well is that loads of studies are increasingly showing this, that reading develops what's called a shadow activity, like a muscle memory in your brain, where your brain keeps working after you've read the book. So you don't finish reading and pop it down and then you're done. Your brain is still working really hard to kind of go over that comprehension and go over that knowledge you've just developed. And as a result, it makes your brain, your muscles, your muscle memory in your brain significantly stronger. And that, again, helps you form better memory control. It helps those neurons fire quicker in your brain and helps prevent age-related memory losses, and it helps protect your brain from other types of brain illnesses and brain problems, which I think is really quite exciting. Additionally, on top of that, which I think will help people even more, is that this isn't even just a mental thing. Physically, you can get fitter from reading. That's obviously from reading fitness books and health books, but actually reading itself in any format develops a part of your brain, or part of the cortex, that helps you build kind of movement and understand movement better and physical sensations. And that then makes your exercise more effective, which makes you fitter. So we have got here something to tell us that reading not just helps you stay younger in your brain, it also helps you stay younger and fitter in your bodies. And all of that type of reading, what it does to your brain and your muscle memory, your actual bodies themselves, is really, really good for you. So you can seem more intelligent, you can feel more confident in your speaking and writing, and you can make your brain and body healthier from reading. And that's just 2. I'm only 2 in, so hopefully you're already getting encouraged to pick up books more often. Mental health is another one that we really need to think about here as well, in terms of actually how you cope with stress, people who have mental health diagnosis and how reading helps there. Really interesting, and I think really, really important, and something I'm really passionate about, is how mental health studies are increasingly showing that reading helps people cope better and helps people strategize better, to the point that significant numbers of mental health and wider health charities and industries around the world are actually introducing reading as part of a kind of functional medicine program and part of medicinal support. So we know that studies in this are developing, and we know how important it's becoming. A big thing particularly is that reading reduces your stress levels. So whether or not you feel you have mental health problems, or just generally would like to lower your stress, as little as 6 minutes a day, so 6 minutes of reading a day, just 6 minutes of a book a day, can reduce your stress levels by 60%. That is humongous, because what that does to your heart rate, your muscle tension, what that does to your state of mind, your relationship dynamics as a result, your ability to cope at work, is huge. Absolutely huge and really exciting. And this phenomenon is actually called bibliotherapy, and it's showing that increasingly anyone suffering from depression or any levels of stress find a really profound, really helpful effect, that reading can reduce this number of stress for them. And I think a part of reading and surviving with reading is also that reading provides a kind of method of consolation. So it supports you a level of escapism, certainly, but also it gives you this concept of finding a world that maybe feels different or safer than your own, and therefore you can engage in a way that takes you out of your current problems, your current worries, and gives you an escapism and gives you a support mechanism. What's really key about reading literature is that it obviously provides different ways of coping, but also often tells you stories of people who've survived things similarly. And I think they then give you loads of hope and courage. And if you want a kind of more factual approach, the non-fiction books, which still hugely count obviously as reading, I'm not just talking about literature here or fictional pieces, non-fiction books can give you strategies as well as, again, survival stories. So reading doesn't just literally reduce your stress levels, again, in the brain chemistry. It actually helps people think about what they're suffering with and other people who've suffered the same, making them feel more that they're kind of in a collaborative effort and they're not so alone, and certainly giving them ideas to how to cope and how to strategize and treat their mental health, which is really, really important. So reading, again, another way to help you survive, another way to help you feel better. And this is so key because the NHS has quite recently actually introduced a programme called Reading Well, which is a sort of prescription book service where some surgeries across the country are starting to use their experts and their GPs to recommend books, primarily non-fiction, but some fiction books, as a kind of medical treatment for depression and stress-induced problems. So this is something that's becoming quite interesting in the medical world. And I think as a result, it's something we certainly need to implement more into kind of home life and school life and work life as well. So we're 3 in, and we've talked about brain power, we've talked about vocabulary, we've talked about mental health. And we're on to what would be the last one now, which I think is the one I feel most passionate about, as I said earlier, because it's the reason I came in to teach, and came to teach English particularly. So compassion and imagination, building those skills are absolutely vital, I think, to having a creative, but more importantly, to having an empathetic and fulfilling and diverse, inclusive life. Literature tends to give gateways into people's stories that you wouldn't normally access, that you couldn't possibly know for your own personal experiences. They give you something bigger and something different to think about. And I think that's the most important skill that we need in this current global climate, particularly. This is also called a kind of theory of the mind, where reading, and people who read more often tend to be more empathetic, and as a result can often build and maintain stronger social relationships. So people who read more often might have more successful relationships, they might have more successful working careers and friendships, because they have this ability to kind of empathize with others better and actually build stronger relationships, because they're more likely to think compassionately about how someone else feels if you're not just relating to personal experience all the time. There's a particular study I was reading that actually shows us that the more you read, the more mirror neurons you build in your brain. And these mirror neurons create a more compassionate mindset, because they're an idea that you can mirror yourself in someone else's story. And the more you see yourself in it, or the more you've personally engaged with something, the more you're then able to share that out and be more compassionate in reality. I think as well that fiction here tends to be more useful than non-fiction in a way, because it's less personalised and it's not kind of one visual figure. But even still, any ambiguity in fiction is really, really important, because it actually is really key in creativity and inclusivity. The more you can accept an ambiguity of a storyline, of someone's identity, the more you can be inclusive to what else is out there, and more creative and more imaginative, because you start to understand the world in different ways and people in different ways. And a really lovely quote to kind of summarise this is Atticus Finch from To Kill a Mockingbird, which we study at GCSE and which is one of my favourite books. And he claims that you can never really understand a person until you consider things from his point of view, until you climb inside of his skin and walk around in it. And books let us do that. They let you imagine you live in another world and imagine that you are another person. They tell you stories of places that you can't possibly get to, or people that don't really exist, but doesn't mean they're not important, or doesn't mean that they're not representative of something real. So understanding that books are a baseline for accessing stories around the globe and stories of people around the globe is really important to me. And I think particularly in this time when we are stuck at home and we're having to kind of enjoy the world in different ways, literature gives you a travel. It's essentially a chance to travel, and it's not limited by time or space or physics or geography. You can go anywhere in the world. You can go into fantastical realms and alternate universes. You can go into the city of London if you can't even get there now. You can go to Africa, Asia. You can even go to underwater if you prefer. the point is that books will take you anywhere, anytime, and they give you a chance to discover places and people that you wouldn't get a chance to even if you were traveling in the real world. And I think as a result, reading makes you more of a global citizen. And more than likely, our studies are increasingly showing us that that build up of the theory of mind, the build up of the empathy from reading makes you a better person. And that is what we need more than anything in the world, is more compassionate people, and people who are more able to empathize and engage and be inclusive. And like I said, it's kind of the one that most interests me. And Mockingbird is a great gateway book into thinking about inclusivity and diversity, and particularly obviously in the current climate with Black Lives Matter in America and the UK and across the world. My top tips then to kind of finalise are making sure that we summarise what you actually need to be doing. So that was all information for you to learn about why you should be reading. Whether or not you remember it is maybe not so as important as whether or not you implement it. We know now that reading boosts your vocabulary, your comprehension skills, and will heighten your IQ. We know that reading will better your mental health, it will boost your brain chemistry and protect you from later brain diseases. And the bonus really, it can help you physically too. We also know that reading generally makes people more compassionate, which makes your relationship stronger, probably makes you a stronger and kinder person. My top tips then to make sure that you actually get to experience all of those things and benefit from those things is to make sure you read, preferably from a book, as we said, not a device, for 6 to 10 minutes every day. I think that will probably shock a lot of people because you expect that you should be reading for hours, and that's not the case at all. It doesn't matter if you're reading the same book all year and it's 6 minutes of it every day. That's still brilliant. That is still better than nothing if that's where you are at. So reading from 6 to 10 minutes a day, preferably from books, will be really beneficial in all of those areas we've looked at. Books as a format for talking and sharing, I think, are really, really key. They help you understand and discuss social political topics with a little more comfort and sensitivity. I think they also give people routes into express feelings that they wouldn't otherwise be able to formulate or explain. So sharing and talking about books is brilliant for your relationships, it's brilliant for your working dynamics, it's brilliant for your friendships, and it's brilliant as well for kind of developing your own understanding of yourself and becoming more self and socially aware. Podcasts, we actually have a Western Belt one that I'm going to plug here, I'm really sorry. Podcasts are really useful as well because they help, again, develop that previous point about sharing feelings and accessing feelings, but also listening to podcasts on a book that you've read will develop your understanding of it further, again, further develop your empathy, your intellect, your vocabulary. So podcasts are a really great way in if you're someone who tends to struggle reading books and maybe needs a little bit of help along the way. Alternatively, if you're not so much of an audio person, you can join a book club, either with your friends and family, or Goodreads has a really excellent online global one that you can access and leave your reviews in, and people tend to spring off really interesting discussion threads, so that's also another way in as well. And my last one is to read really widely, a wide range of stories. Poetry is also a brilliant way to read shorter snippets if you prefer, and be really adventurous and inclusive in your choices. I think it's really important to not get into the habit of picking up just what you know you like, partly because it makes us a little bit lazier, but also I think it stops you from accessing stories that are really wonderful and really incredible and really ambitious, and it will make you more intelligent and more compassionate to read stories outside of your kind of normal preferences or what you think you like or what you think you know. So try and look at books that maybe you wouldn't normally pick up and give them a go. And I think to add on to that, because a lot of people I think find this tricky with books, is that you can return them. If you don't like it, you can always take it back to the shop. You can donate it to schools or to charities, or you can even gift it onwards. So books don't have to be permanent. There's not no failure in starting a book and not liking it and starting another one. I think the key thing is that you keep trying and you keep looking, you keep pushing yourself to read. We know how many benefits reading have, and we know how important it is to shaping individuals and societies. And it's something that obviously as head of English, I really, really feel strongly about. So thank you so much for joining me. I really hope that this has been informative and interesting for you. And I hope that more than anything, you pick up a book over the summer and you read at least for 6 minutes a day and talk about it with your family and friends, and come back to school, our pupils, in September and tell me about them as well, please. Thank you, and do take care of yourselves. And again, a final goodbye from me as well. A reminder that we do have the Western Vet podcast. I've also posted recommended reading lists for our Key Stage 3, 4 and 5 pupils, and I'll be doing another one at the end of the term on Friday. So stay in touch with us. we're big readers at Western But, not just the English department, and we love talking about books, as you can tell from the staff on the podcast. And our pupils are generally really interested in the books that we have on our curriculum. So we really want to kind of keep that going in this big gap where you actually can't go out and do very much else. So take advantage of it, build your brain power, boost your vocabulary, burgeon your physical activity as well, build and boost your compassion, and more importantly, think about how books can make you a better person and a better world, we hope. So thank you, and do take care. Bye.